and welcome to Dungeons and Drama Nerds. My name is Nick, and today I will be joined by the cast of our Kids on Bikes game. Today we are here to talk about this visit to Bromwell, Pennsylvania, and how everything went. Let's go around and one last time, let's share names, pronouns if you'd like to, and the roles you played in the campaign, starting with CJ.
I'm CJ Linton, and my pronouns are he, him, and I was the GM.
Thank you very much. Emma?
My name's Emma Covert. My pronouns are she, her, and I played the role of Fred Hudson.
Thank you. Esther?
Hi, my name is Esther Coe. My pronouns are she, her, and I played George.
And last but not least for now, Percy.
My name is Percy Hornak. I use he, they, and Z pronouns, and I played Hank Boswell.
Also in our game was Alamak, who played Kodiak Thompson Lee Garcia Smith, who is not able to join us right now, but we hope that they're having a great time. So to kick things off, CJ, I wanted to ask you, what did you enjoy running about this game? This is your first time running Kids on Bikes, as I understand it. So talk to us a little bit about what that was like for you.
Yeah, this was my first time running Kids on Bikes. My favorite part was the players, which I think is true of like every game I run. I think even game systems that I connect with less, like if the players are having a good time and excited and engaged, like, sure, I'll run that once. I think the main thing that was different was like difficulty values for roles, and kind of like if I'm a GM, pre-planning what you might think of as module content, and a player that wants to attempt something has a stat that has that die is 4, and that difficulty value is set at a 12. Like going in knowing that like that character is very likely to fail is just a different thing to think about than maybe some systems where you're working with one die with a modifier. I think that was I've run a lot of games, so this didn't feel like super outside of the wheelhouse of anything I've run before.
Just out of curiosity, what are some of the things you've run that you feel like very familiar with?
I run Cyberpunk Red every week. I have run a lot of Grant Howitt's very simple one-shots, and then I'm in as a player The Expanse and Lancer, so like pretty wide range of like crunchier systems and stats.
Yeah, I was going to say, if running Cyberpunk every week will make you feel very adept at any other game system, I feel like, is my impression. Great. Thank you. For everybody else, I think this was everybody's first time playing Kids on Bikes. Is that correct? Yeah. So talk to me a little bit, cast, as well. What did you dig about the game? What did you enjoy? And was there anything that really surprised you about the game?
Well, I'll go. I really, really loved this game. I have a lot of like positive feelings about like the genre of like Kids on Bikes media. Like this is very close to my heart in a lot of ways, in terms of just like doing like dumb kid stuff, and you know, like diving a little bit into the spooky and paranormal is very much my wheelhouse as just like a person. So I really like the genre of the game and the things that the game sets out to do. But I was surprised by how sort of like intuitive the mechanics felt after a little while, and I was surprised that like in the course of the gameplay I really didn't like care that much about whether I succeeded or failed. Like it's like something about the way that the game tells story made me feel so much more invested in just like what happens next, as opposed to like, did I do the thing that I was trying to do? But yeah, which was like a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I think the mechanic of I honestly, I don't even know that I know the mechanics of this game still. But like you said, Percy, it doesn't really matter. And I think CJ did such a wonderful job of like building this world and outlining the story to keep us engaged in what was happening. But the mechanic where like if you failed, then you get an extra point later, I think really lends itself to that feeling of like we care more about the story than whether we succeed or fail at any given moment.
Right. There's a little
cool.
like failure doesn't feel quite so crushing, maybe.
Yeah, and there's more. There's still opportunity within it. I think is really built into the game mechanics at least, or maybe part of that is just how CJ told the story, just in a way that was really felt not safe is the right term, but in a way to take those risks because I feel like I knew whether or not I succeeded or failed, quote unquote, it was still going to be an interesting story.
Can I ask you about the story, CJ? I did want to ask, how much of that did you have sort of planned out when you started the game, and how much of it was stuff that you just made up on the spot?
I always try not to over prep because no matter how many games I run, I always know there is going to be something that I'm like, no one will care about this, where everybody's like, let's spend 10 minutes harassing this field trip tour guide.
You asked us if we had any questions.
No, and I love that, and I invite that, and also like that is not the thing that I thought we would spend that amount of time on, and that's totally okay, and genuinely one of the things I love about tabletop games. I had sort of like the higher level clues figured out. I knew the mayor did it. I knew that you guys would eventually end up in this like sort of fiery cave situation under the city because we'd spent so much time talking about it in the world creation session. But in terms of locations, we created a lot more of them together than I thought than we ended up going to. So I tried to have like a couple little hooks at every place for you guys to sort of explore. Like if you had gone to Kodiak's house and met all of his parents, that would have been a different avenue into the thing. We had a diner that we never made it to. Lots of little things like that. So I guess it felt like a decent amount of prep to me, but like had you not gone anywhere, it wasn't like, dang, that's like 3 pages of notes I have to throw out,
So you had kind of all the setting elements and all the hooks there, but maybe not as much in terms of quote unquote story.
Yeah. I don't know if any of you had the chance to look at the Kids on Bikes scenarios in the back of the book, but in terms of like what we built together, I would say was pretty comparable to like the setting component of that. And then there are like there's a whole list of hooks for each of those scenarios that are all really cool. And sort of the route of prep I went was generating like a similar thing for the different locations that I thought you would end up at.
I feel like Bromwell was such an interesting place to hang out, and it was made all the more interesting because of these characters. So I wanted to ask, I guess this is initially for the players, but for everybody, because so much of the creation of Bromwell was collective, how did you enjoy playing with the kind of tropes and the world creation process that you all did in session 0?
I mean, yeah, it was really fun. I think the collaborative aspect of it was so great. I really loved the, all mechanics of all going around and having sort of a randomized thing that we chose. For me, and I think this is larger in the Kids and Bikes, I mean, I grew up in a rural town in Pennsylvania, which is very run down and dying. And, we had a car industry come in and try to we thought that it would bring all this stuff in, and it didn't. And so in a way, I don't know, it sort of, I really like this genre and I love this story because that almost helps me imagine a world where that town I grew up was more interesting and had all these secrets and things in it and stuff that, was as opposed to what it actually was, which was just boring. So yeah, but that was really fun. And in the same way of being more of myself as I am now as a kid versus who I actually was as a kid in that weird way, I think, yeah, which was really fun. And again, to be in you think that, oh man, if I knew now what I knew back when I was a kid, I would do this and this, which I mean, if you were that, you wouldn't be who you are now. But still, there is that sort of like desire. Like I would have been way more into nature and stuff as a kid. So it was fun to like re-examine that through this lens and yeah, explore this incredible little town that, you know, we built together, but that CJ just absolutely brought to life.
I had so much fun in session 0. Like I could just do that for 10 sessions, just like making up characters.
Come up with weird food combinations.
Yes. And just like random history that these characters share that you're like, So it was a really fun process for me. And I feel like it was really different from playing the actual game as the character. I feel like when in session 0, I was a lot more like activated in terms of like, oh, I'm coming up with ideas. Versus playing the game, I was like, oh, look at all these really entertaining people saying funny shit. Oh, wait, I'm part of this. Hold on. Okay. I gotta participate, right? This is not just like a movie I'm watching.
I think like for me, I agree that like the world building was really, really fun, and it was really cool to get to do that collaboratively. In terms of like playing off of tropes and stuff in character creation, that was really fun as well, in part because like for me, like Hank is me leaning into like the grubby little 11-year-old childhood that I did not get to have. Like this is me like doing all of the like fun things that I've seen in movies that I'm like, wouldn't it have been great to like, you know, be a gross little boy. So part of it was very like personal in that way, and part of it was also just like I find it really a lot easier to come up with a character if you're basing it on like a thing that is like legible to you from movies and TV and whatever. Like I think it's really easy to seize on an idea like, oh, I'm gonna play a bully, or like, oh, I'm gonna play the class clown sidekick guy, and then figure out from there, okay, how am I making this different? How am I sort of like playing with this, or how am I, you know, distinguishing this from like every other sidekick or whatever. Like that felt a lot easier in terms of like generating who my character was and who I was going to be.
I actually had kind of a hard time with the trope aspect. I think partly because I was playing a bully and I didn't like playing a bully. And like by the end of the first session, I was like, oh, I don't want to be a bully anymore. So yeah. And then it just kind of turned into like, okay, this feels very stock to me. And I was kind of struggling with like, how do I change this? And I think I just went with like, I'm just going to have a character redemption because that's the easiest thing and the most
but like
fun
that
thing.
also felt at least from another player's perspective, that felt so genuine for George, especially with like the circumstances that we stuff was getting serious and all these mysteries, like the fact of the bully, quote unquote redemption arc, but just, she's 13, she's figuring it out, and like putting her in a source of stress, like that felt so off, like her, at least from my perspective, from me watching and like listening, seeing you perform, like George's story felt so authentic from there, and it was so sweet and satisfying.
I think it really helped actually that I felt like the three of you were like super bonded because you were all these awkward like weirdos. And then I was just dumping on you, but I felt like, oh, I want to be part of that. And like, I think that's how bullies actually feel.
Yeah.
I will also say, like, as a GM, I love when players make choices to like select a trope or a character with a history where they're going to create some of the conflict, even though it is like definitely a challenging role to take on. So it was really enjoyable knowing like, oh, there are some situations that maybe these like, at least on the surface, more initially sympathetic characters are going to react to. And then like George is going to react in a different way. And that is going to be fun and dynamic for the story in like a way that I think we wouldn't have had you not made the decision to play that character.
Yeah, and also, not to harp on George, but I loved her so much. But like, when we talked about, her being older and talking about how she's older, like I think it was interesting to see that trope sort of played with, where there were moments that I genuinely, we teased her of like, oh, you're the adult, but like I did feel that sort of protectiveness from her on a genuine level, like in certain areas, which was really, really sweet to see. Taking care of like I am the adult and I have to take care of these little weirdos.
I felt like all of the children actually grew like a lot in some ways over the course of the 2 sessions. Did that feel true for you two as well, Percy and Emma? And if so, was that like an intentional choice on your part, or did it just kind of happen?
Yeah, I think part of the like growth that I was like secretly hoping for at the beginning was that like we started right with these like 2 people, R.I.P. Sandy. Truly R.I.P. Sandy the Sandstone, who's actually just a regular rock. One of my like secret hopes was that like we had these like 2 pairs of people who knew each other and then they didn't know the other 2. And I was like, we have to gel as a group. We have to become like a group of 4 that's like all friends. And then there's also Micah, who became a 5th person in our group of friends. Like that was part of my hope, is that we would all sort of like grow together through whatever circumstances we encountered. And I didn't necessarily know in advance, like, oh, I want Hank to become like this. But I was sort of like, what happens when you have this kid who like only understands the real world through the context of like action movies, and what happens when that person encounters like real actual danger. And I don't like know how much of like whatever happened like read or like came across in like the story that we told together, but I was sort of like, oh, like that has changed him fundamentally. So I was definitely like, here's a really specific given circumstance that I'm starting from that will definitely change through whatever story happens. Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to try to, I'd have to listen, I think, again, because in the moment I didn't really necessarily feel a lot of change with Fred. Certainly, in some way, I think, it was like, oh, some of her fears are justified because all of her preparation, I was binding a man with dental floss by the end, and it was like, right. But on the other hand, I think being, some of the connections with the other kids, I think, I love Benny, the true MVP of the story next to Sandy.
Shout out to a king.
Shout out to a short 30-something king. I don't know if he's canonically short, but I'm going to say it. But no, I do think that there were little moments, especially that brought that out. Fred maybe taking those chances. I really wanted going in for something with Fred and George to sort of reconnect, and I felt that like with George's sort of progression arc, and like in the beginning, like George. Or Fred went after George in the dining hall, and then also sort of like calling her, maybe she would have taken that rejection, but in the end sort of reaching out again. I don't think I had, I didn't anticipate that initially. So that was sort of a fun thing to feel like, you know what? And again, playing her as this little sort of me as I am now a little bit early, as I wasn't as into like nature and stuff as a kid as I am now, but with the anxiety that I've had all my life, and sort of, taking that step of overcoming that and being like, I'm going to take a chance and see how she's doing. And like that. So like in little areas, yeah, I do feel that there was some change in that. And again, if anything, with all of this stuff, I just wanted to know more, because it was so the taste we got of these characters in this world was so much fun. I think there's so much more I would have liked to have seen from them in different circumstances, because it's all just was really, really fun and wonderful.
Yeah, that's always our favorite thing to hear in these conversations.
It was like I could see it. Yeah. I could see a little animated show about these kids or something. Get some Gravity Falls or something like that. You know.
Can we do a second run of sessions where they all go to drama camp?
Oh, no.
And they all put on a play.
Oh Lord!
I would run that.
Hell yeah!
Wait, is that when we do by the author of Lady Windermere's Fan? But it's like the kids at drama camp. I mean,
I think it would be very funny. I think it would be very, very good.
We got to convince. We first all got to convince George to come to drama camp with us.
Oh, I think George is there. I think George is coming.
She pretends she doesn't want to be there, but she actually signed up months ago.
Well, she doesn't want to be at drama camp, but she's going to be a star. So this is just.
That's very good. Anyway, I didn't mean to derail us. I guess I'll tell like a little secret though, is that one thing that I was thinking about as Hank in the very beginning is I was like, oh, like maybe Hank feels a little jealous of Kodi and Micah, like maybe that would be, and that's the thing that I ended up exploring at all. But I was like, oh, like that's a feeling that Hank has, is like that's my friend, and like I'm used to having like being his only friend. But here's this other person.
I wanted to ask, this is switching gears a little bit to real life, but I did want to ask as well, all of you are, artistic, creative people in various ways, writers, photographers, performers, dramaturgs. So I wanted to ask how you felt your artistic and creative practices affected how you approached the game, if they did at all.
I'm happy to speak to that. So I was definitely a writer before I got into tabletop games, and then I am also a dramaturg. And I think on a world building level, I think I am trying to like center player experience in a way that is maybe not dissimilar from how you're thinking about like supporting your creative team and your production staff and your audience members engaging with work, like regardless of the content of that work. And then within the session itself, I think something that comes up a lot in tabletop games is where you are encountering a situation and you don't immediately know what to do, or you don't immediately have like an in-character response to that. And I think there's a lot of like very good dramaturgical literature about asking questions and making sure you're like meeting a play where it is. I'm thinking of like a Visit to a Small Planet specifically, like, okay, we're in a situation, the players don't seem to know what to do. What questions can I ask, or what information can I reframe to like help us continue moving forward in the story we're telling together, is like always one of my first impulses.
I love that. And I think my approach to tabletop games has been character driven, which is the same as my approach to writing. And so that feels like a very solid place for me to start. Like it's kind of the thing I hang on to when I'm like, I don't really know what the mechanics are or how to do it or if it's right, but like, that's okay. I'm just going to play my character. But I actually think that I have noticed that playing tabletop games has actually impacted my writing more than the other way around, I think, because I am a person that tends to get really overwhelmed by plot and like what happens next. And so being in this experience, especially with other people who are also creative, where like, I don't know, I have no idea what's going to happen, in the next 5 minutes, but like things keep happening just out of a natural progression. And then you look back and you're like, oh, wow, there's this whole story that came out of it. And so when I'm writing, I'm like, it's okay, just keep going. It'll come. It will come.
That's really cool. I'm really glad to hear you say that, actually, Esther. I'm really excited to hear that.
I feel really similarly in that, like, yeah, I'm also a dramaturg, and I'm used to like the collaborative, like the world building questions that we did is a thing that I do in almost every rehearsal process that I'm in, because like it's such a good way to kind of get everybody participating in like the thing that we're doing. But I felt similarly in terms of like, I was not worried about actively like trying to do, like, I was not worried about doing the thing that like would be successful, or like doing the thing that felt most likely to advance the plot. Like I was just kind of like, what's interesting? Like what's fun to play off of all of the other people here with, because everybody had such a like strong character who was like, everybody had like their thing that they did. So it was really, really fun to just sort of be like, okay, like I can trust all of the people like in this session with me to like respond to the thing that I'm offering. So like I can just like put the most interesting thing, or like put the thing that I want to do out, and trust that something will happen because of it, as opposed to like other games I've played where it is sort of like, oh, I have to like figure out what the correct TM thing to do is.
Yeah, I definitely know that, especially with, I think for me, it's more of a problem I have as a GM and something than as a player. Whereas I feel like with a player, I definitely do feel the Esther thing of I'm 90% I'm like character driven. What story and what story am I telling with this character? I know for me as a visual artist, I can't really pin down a character until I can see them. And, like until I've drawn them once, and like they cut some kind of distinct figure. So that, and from that, I sort of get the personality and things like that. So this was definitely a really interesting way for me to because I didn't have necessarily the prep time I usually do for these characters and things like that. Like usually I'll do like these whole, studies and things. And so I had to sort of get into Fred a little quicker, but it felt really natural. And I think part of that is I sometimes intentionally, mostly unintentionally, make characters that have at least one strong aspect that is me, or that is something that I am like dealing with in my life at the moment, or some personality trait of mine. And sometimes I'll go in knowing like, oh yeah, this is, about my commitment issues, or this is about this, or anxiety or something. And other times, like years later, I'll be like, oh my gosh, this side thing that I did as a character was totally about this thing going on in my real life, and I had no idea. And oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing. But also, like, I think I worked through that because of this. And which I think is kind of the beauty of tabletop RPGs. They're collaborative storytelling, but they're a weird kind of therapy sometimes too. And like I mentioned before, Fred was a lot of, not only the anxiety that I struggle with, especially as a child, and, wanting to be in control and having everything, basically if you think that if you do everything correct, everything will be okay, which is obviously not how the world works. And that was really interesting to put into the brain of a 12-year-old, and especially with all these goobers and, all these other kids that I'm running around with in this weird town. That was really fun to explore as an artist and as a storyteller, which, is also just a whole thing with the genre of playing kids is how do you play a kid? Like, it's so difficult to do that, but it was so much fun. And I found myself in the midst of it worrying less about playing a kid and just playing a person, which I was really worried about going into. And, again, in a large part because of CJ being such a fantastic GM, and Percy and Ella and Esther and everybody just creating this natural world that, like you said earlier, Esther, about coming in and being like, oh gosh, like I'm with all these people and I have to be funny and it's a show, and like that all just melted away, and I just like was able to just have fun with you guys, which I think made a fantastic story.
I'm really curious whether anyone else felt that like concern about playing a kid, or like what your experience was like playing a kid, because I realized when I was prepping this, I was like, oh, I don't think I've ever had a role playing opportunity to play a kid for like a long, like because I GM a lot. So like I've certainly impersonated a kid briefly before, but not
as
for
a
like
GM.
a
there are no children
PC.
In my world. I refuse. I don't know how they're just there. We don't talk about it because it's scary. It's you want to do them justice in a way. You don't want to oversimplify them, but it's I mean, we're all kids in a way, but it is a very difficult, at least from my personal experience, a very difficult balance to walk. But again, with this game, within a session or two, that was all gone, and I just was the person, this young person who's figuring it out, and which was really, really fun.
That's so funny to me. I love playing children because they are so uninhibited and they say the things that they.
That's what it was. That's what it was leaning into. I think that just like saying what you're feeling or doing what you want, I think was the biggest thing for me, of being like, oh, I'm just gonna do this.
Yeah, like it is so much fun for me because you like have an excuse to not worry about like what are the rules and like what are like what's legal, like, well, not what's legal, but like like you
farting in the library is illegal, Hank.
Well, I don't care. But yeah, like I find playing characters who have an excuse to be really uninhibited and be impulsive and just like do the things that they want to do really, really freeing. I find it really fun, and I love playing children and I love playing teenagers. Yeah.
I also love playing kids, and I even as a performer, playing kids is always like my jam. Just because it is so much fun. It does naturally bring that sense of play into whatever you're doing, so that it's not like, what is this like deep tortured character that I need to understand? It's just like, nah, follow your impulses. And I also love that, like, you don't have to play a kid, right? Like, kids can be smart, kids can be dumb, kids can be mature. They can, like, it doesn't really matter. So, yeah, I really like kids.
Yeah, I think once you get over that for me, once I stopped thinking of it as playing a kid, I was able to play a kid.
Yeah.
Well, I also feel like we all have like, I have so many more things to draw in if I'm thinking about like, what is it like to play a middle schooler than if I'm trying to play like a lawyer or something, right? Like I have to imagine a lot more for that.
A lot less research.
Well, exactly. Like I went to middle school. I was like, well, I was actually not the shithead class clown. I was terrified of very bad social anxiety and was not like Hank at all. But like I know people like that, and like I can just think back to field trips that I was on when I was in middle school and like play around with that. Like it's all similar to like the tropes and everything that are built into the game. Like it all feels really familiar to me. And there's like a joy in like revisiting that as well.
I think I also think about it similarly to like theater for young audiences, where it's like, yes, this, like maybe this is for kids and maybe the characters are kids, but also like kids are very fucking smart. And if you are treating them as two-dimensional or not considering like that complexity of experience and maybe how much they've already gone through, like they're going to see through that, and it's like not going to land in the way that you would hope. And also, like, this was my first time running kids on bikes, and throughout it I was like, have you guys like played a lot of kids and tabletop games before? Because this feels like so well executed and delightful in like a way that intellectually I think I expected, but maybe didn't, like just couldn't anticipate like that emotional experience until we were actually in it. So kudos to all of you.
Oh my God. I also, because Nick, you mentioned we don't abide by the Geneva Convention. And some of those one-liners from Kodi that I'm like, oh my gosh, like what child would come up with this? But like, of course, Kodi would come up with this.
I'm so sad Ella's not here because, man, there were some things they said that there was something they said, there was like a passive-aggressive thing they said. They just kept therapying George in like a passive-aggressive way, and they would have these one-liners about like, oh, she's dealing with her own issues and that's not our, and I was just like, but also that is exactly a thing that a kid growing up with Kodi's parents would say around, say to other people and just be like, yup, okay, yeah. We don't abide by the Geneva Convention. Oh, man. Oh, that was good.
There were a lot of good one-liners. I found myself thinking this morning, and I wish Ella were here, but I found myself thinking, I can't tell if I really want to meet Kodi's parents or if I would find them like entirely unbearable. You know, like it's one or the other, but no middle ground.
Both. Yes. I want to meet them, and I want to be able to leave when I need to, and also I love them, and also it's a lot of complicated feelings to all of Kodi's parents, specifically all together.
This is my biggest regret about our game, is that I wish we had met all of Kodi's caregivers.
Oh God, just like a dinner party with all of the parents and the kids or something. Like just what that would look like. Oh Lord. Oh my goodness.
CJ plays 8 NPCs in one scene.
More than 8 if we're including all of Kodi's parents and if the partners are invited too. And then but the sheer different dynamics in that room. Good Lord.
I end up playing so many NPCs all the time in my Cyberpunk game, and sometimes they have combat stat blocks. So just like,
oh yeah,
the role playing part would have been totally fine. Like, honestly, That was
Just
one of
see
my
you talking to
regrets
himself
too.
for a good
Yeah.
10 minutes while we're all enraptured.
I did want to ask, Percy, you mentioned one of your regrets was not getting to meet Kodi's parents at more length. Was there anything else that anybody wishes they had done differently, like now that you're looking back, whether that's an impulse you wish you had followed or maybe an impulse you wish that you did follow that you wish you hadn't?
I think something that always comes to mind for me, like when we build out a really rich world, is like I would have loved to be able to like feature Kodi's parents. And Emma, you developed a really lovely relationship with Frank and her dad that we didn't really get to see any of. And then we had some like other fun locations. So just like knowing that for every place we did spend a lot of time and get to explore, there were like 3 or 4 we didn't. So that was sort of that. I think that was the main bummer for me. And I found myself thinking sometimes like, how do I get people like out of this location and into the next one? And then reminding myself that like, actually it is fine to like sit in the moment and not have to go through everything that we built as a part of that world building session.
Yeah, and that definitely was something that I it's not something I regret, because I think the choices that we all made sense for the story and made sense in the moment. But it is one of those things, again, like, in another world where, just based on the nature of things, we get to play some more or explore more of those things. The relationship between Fred and Frank was very near and dear to my heart, and we got a little bit of it. And there's another world in which I would have loved to explore that some more, as well as see, the parent and kid dynamics. I think especially playing kids and playing these kids specifically, and I think a lot of us put, at least from what I saw, a good bit of really interesting dynamics with the parents and the kids that they sort of shaped. I think in another world I would have loved to have seen that some more. But also, we were in a mine and we were kind of busy. It was on fire.
Kinda, yes. This is not a regret necessarily, but I remember I think like a day or two after we finished our last session, I was like in the shower and I had a moment where I was like, man, I really wish I had played like a really dumb character. And then I was like, also, it would have been really fun to play like a foreign exchange student who assumes that all of this is normal because everything is weird. Like, I just kept coming up with more characters for this world, so I just wish I could play all of them.
You've called me out on my strategy, which is play a really dumb character.
But you weren't dumb. You had your adventure movie knowledge, which was actually very useful.
Mm-hmm. Cowboy hat.
My personal regret as Percy was not reviewing some more action films before we recorded, lest I could have stuck some more things in. My other regret as a player is not making the most of I feel like there were some missed opportunities, I think, with Micah, where we I was like, I feel like we didn't necessarily explore what that shared NPC feeling is to the fullest, and that would have been really fun. Although it was extremely convenient that Micah was like, I want to go to the Old Town Hall. And we were like, great, we're going.
I mean,
Do you want to go deeper into the Old Town Hall? Yes.
We'll go. Sure. We'll go. Yeah. But yeah, I think that any quote unquote regrets I have are more that this was such a lovely taste of the game system and of these characters and of this world that made me want more and made me, because of how much fun it was, it was less of a regretting what I did in the moment, more being like, oh, and then what would happen if this, and what about this, and this kind of thing that, is more sweet than bittersweet, I think, because it just meant it was that much fun and that good.
I had a similar thought, Percy, regarding Micah as the powered character, because something like that is very, I have as a GM who loves GMing, I have a preference for GM'd games, but I think sometimes you lose something really lovely about belonging games, for example, where everybody shares the setting elements and can move the story forward in that way, or other games that tarot draw games where there's no GM, things like that. And so the powered character is this really lovely space in between a totally GM-less game and like an opportunity for the players to have more control over the story. But I also, to an extent, felt like it was like any other mechanic where when people are really into the story and into the moment, like sometimes you look up and it's like, oh, maybe I should have asked for a roll, or maybe like I should have paused to remind people how the powered character works. But so long as everybody's having a good time, like with the shared story, like that seems fine. Like we got through it. We had a good time.
Yeah, I think that's, I realized I forgot to say that was one of those things of that powered character. I've never like done a game where there is, you know, such like a player sort of shared NPC. And I thought that was so cool that was one of those aspects that I wanted to, you know, play more of Kids on Bikes and play more of that to really get the chance to explore that. Because when we did, like, there were moments where like one of us would be like, oh my gosh, wait, Mike, like reminding each other sort of what we could do, which was so much fun to do. And I think, you know, given more time and stuff, that would be really, really interesting to explore.
Yeah, like I remember like the moment where Micah's loves animals transformed into like can talk to animals was like, that's so cool. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And like more moments like that would have been really cool.
Cast, I was wondering, are there any questions that you three have that you want to ask CJ before we wrap up? And I know there's one from Percy.
It's like a silly, but I'm just curious about it because the like episode that aired most recently as we're recording this had a moment where like Hank very well could have like gotten sucked into one of the gelatinous clouds. And I'm curious, like, would we have ended up in like the scary room at Bromcom if that had happened, just like alone?
Absolutely.
That's so sad.
But I think the, like, on one hand, oh no, splitting the party, but I think that would have been like a very good clue that the gelatinous cubes are sort of these like dimensional, they're not following the laws of physics and like have this sort of teleportation aspect to them that I think you all could have used in a fun way to reunite. So
that would have been extremely fun. Yeah, because when it happened, I remember being like, oh shit, am I going to ruin this game by rolling poorly and doing something reckless? But like, I know you well enough to know that like, of course it wouldn't ruin anything. But like, I was like, oh no. Although in the moment, I don't know if you all thought this, but I was definitely like, I will die if like my character will simply die if I go into one of these cubes.
I actually have a rule for every like set of people I play with that I like won't kill your character unless you want me to, regardless of what the game system says. I just think it's like shitty for people to do that without the sort of like discussion up front with players about what they're looking for, even if it's a game like D&D. Like, yeah,
I mean, in my own games, I joke that you die when you get to die when I let you, like, kind of in a way that is, for me, obviously, and don't let my players hear this because I need the fear of God in them at all times, but just to keep them in check. But genuinely, like, there have been some very serious moments, and you know, what happens. And I think part of it is the world that you're in, you know, obviously in certain areas of D&D, there's like options. Like I know that if one of my characters would die, the others would chase them into the afterlife or something. But at the same time, for me, it is this sort of unspoken rule of the story. This character is going to be done when their story is told, whatever that looks like for the player. That's when that story ends, you know, rather than just, you know, me taking it out from under them because of a mistake necessarily. And I definitely felt that in this. And, you know, part of it was, you know, playing as kids, but also just, that whole through line, I definitely felt that CJ as a GM, I felt that care and that, you know, dedication to the story that I never doubted you or the story that you were telling for a second. And that provided a lot of comfort. Even when I was nervous about being a player, doing this or this, I always knew that like, it's going to end up where it's going to end up, and that's going to be the story that's told.
Mostly, I just mean like the stakes felt very high. Like I was definitely like, oh, I'm doing a really reckless thing. Oh no, wait, I'm doing a really reckless thing.
Absolutely reckless and delightful
just a
for that reason.
Lad.
Listen, every party needs one character who will spring the obvious trap or do the obvious dumb thing because I've been a GM so many times where like my players are very smart So they'll see a thing that is like clearly like some kind of trap or like some kind of trick, and they'll be like, haha, I will not engage with this. And I'm like, oh, but but I felt very clever when I put that together. So when I'm a player, sometimes I'm like, like let me do the thing that is like
Just
clearly
poke this
not.
big red button. I mean, you put it here, so
let's see what it does. Because like, yeah, especially in a story like this where like it is so narratively driven that I was just sort of like, whatever happens is interesting. So like.
And I think that also sort of gets back to how all of you sort of selected like tropes and character aspects that like without like, I mean, as far as I know, you didn't all collude before, but like really in a lovely way moved the story forward, like knowing that if there was something interesting, Percy, that Hank was going to engage with that. And knowing that, like, if there was a situation that maybe the characters didn't immediately have a tool or solution to solve, that Fred would be like, actually, dental floss and a disposable camera.
I have
and like
a knife.
knowing, yeah. And George like driving some of those more interpersonal relationship moments, and like Kodi being reliably bringing you guys back together when there was discord because he just had this very intense like level of emotional awareness for a child his age. Like all of that was so lovely in advancing the story.
Yeah, that's another reason why I'm sad Ella can't be here. I really, Kodi was kind of the very insistent heart of our group in a way that was so endearing. But you, like you said, really, I always knew that Kodi would do or say something that would bring us back together. And that was, again, just one aspect of how much fun this group was, and how, like you said, I mean, as far as I know, we didn't collaborate, but it managed to balance so well in a way. Oh, it was just fun. It was just fun. I know I say it a lot, but it's true.
Well, I feel like that's the benefit of systems that do character creation collaboratively, because like I think like we didn't collude beforehand, but I do think like as we were talking with each other and building things out, I was just sort of like, oh, like this is an interesting choice because of this choice this other person made. Like, oh, if you're this way, then maybe, then maybe this is this other way, or like giving other characters like traits in the questions that you were answering about them to just sort of be like, oh, this is sort of what I'm getting from you, and here's how I might answer this question, is really, I think, fun and generative.
Yeah, I found the questions, especially about character relationships, where it almost felt like I was like invading other people's characters when I was like making stuff up about their past. But then it gave this sense of like ownership with all of the characters too, which is cool.
It's interesting because I feel like in some like tabletop circles, that's very much a like kind of a faux pas to like insert something into another character's like backstory. But in this game, it's very much built into the game, and I think it did really like make it deepened the relationships between all of you in really lovely ways. So that was an interesting thing for me to see from the outside looking in.
Well, I feel like I remember us having moments of like, this is what I'm thinking. What do you feel? Like, how does that feel to you? Does this make sense to you? Mm-hmm. Sort of like offering something.
Yeah, you did all check in with each other.
Yeah, just like offering something, and then that person could kind of take it and be like, oh, well, I think actually it might be this. I think this is what's true about that. I think this is like an additional detail. But it's also really nice because there was so many like really specific like things that tell you, so like the fact that like Hank goes and like terrorizes the library is such a specific thing to know about a character, but it is so helpful for me as a player to be like, oh, like, yeah, that makes sense, that I can like figure out all of these other things that this person does based on this detail that somebody else gave me.
We're running low on time, but I did want to give CJ a chance to ask all of the players any questions that you wanted to ask them. Did you want to open up some of these?
Yeah, I think we covered some of them already, but I would love just to know for each of you, what for your own character, what was sort of your favorite moment throughout the game with them?
Tying up and threatening a grown man was pretty fun. I will say, at least for me as Fred, just I won't forget that. Like, I have such an intense visual of that scene of like Hank threatening with his butt and like all these, and then just Fred in the background with a knife. That was one of those moments that stuck. And like, you know, there are the sweet moments. I mean, you know, calling George, I really was glad that I, you know, felt that and felt that George was at the point where, you know, she would be receptive to that. But man, there's something about being a 12-year-old with a knife.
The thing that jumps out to me, this isn't really a character moment, but the whole scene when, was it Fred and I or Kodi and I were in the like room? I think it was Kodi, right? In the room, and like the gelatinous cubes were coming down on us. Like I felt so much like intense. I was really there. The stakes are so high. What am I gonna do? And then you freaking spring, oh my God, what's her name? The powered character on us. And I was just like, oh my God, what is happening? Like, I was so invested in that moment.
I think I like honorable mention to Hank's action movie slide down the rope ladder into the mine. But I think my favorite is like the choice that I like enjoyed the most is Hank's flair for the dramatic, and his when Benny came into the underground lab and Hank was like, I will not hide, I will stand. I will freeze in place and nobody will see me.
Oh, Hank.
And then the inexplicable injury.
Oh
yes.
My God. Hank's leg. And the callback of it, like, ooh.
What are you supposed to do when your charm die is a D20?
An
and
actor.
you give the most convincing performance of your life, which is why we need to bring the kids to drama camps.
I would love to see Hank's like death scene in this drama camp production of Les Miserables.
Hank will insert a death scene into any play.
It's that trope of how, you know, it's like it's the characters that take 30 minutes to die, or it's the two that are like who gets to die first, and like the one person collapses and the other person's like that is fully Hank. Just like
he's in the play within Midsummer Night's Dream, except he's playing both Pyramus and Bisbee.
Yes, he is. He is Bottom and everyone. He's every character. He's like, no, this is how you do it.
Well, he'll be in like a Shakespeare play and he'll be like, this is really boring, actually. Like, it'll be like a love scene and he'll just be like, well, wouldn't it be funny if someone died right now?
Yes, just in the middle. It's the what's the Michael Scott of every, you know, the thing of it's always more dramatic when somebody comes in with a weapon and just like him be like FBI at every given moment. That's just Hank of just being like, how can I, like, you want it to be the most dramatic that it can be, and just
does Hank grow up to be Michael Scott? Oh no.
Wait, I take it back.
I think Hank is loves his friends too much.
Yes,
that's true.
Yes. Hank has friends, as we know. My young Michael Scott did not. So
he's wholesome and funny and beloved by all. And that must be true.
Great. Well, I think we should probably wrap up here, but I want to give everybody the chance. As any last things you want to add?
Just thank you all. This was really, really fun.
Yeah, it was, again, I can't overemphasize sort of how nervous I felt coming in, and it was just such a wonderful, wonderful experience. Like, mechanically wise, learning a new game, playing with new people I'd never played before with, it was everything I could have wished and more.
Yeah, so the only GMs I've ever had are in this Zoom room, and you are both so amazing that I think I have been spoiled for all TTRPGs in the future. So thank you.
I think my last two things are so much love to Ella and their wonderful character, Kodi, because truly he brought so much to the game. And then, like, this was my first time GMing for a recording. And I mean, you experienced my GMing. I don't do character voices, and sometimes like the visual descriptions are not my strongest suit on an improv basis. So it was like very lovely and exciting to get to do this with you guys.
Well, thank you all so much. It was such a joy to listen to you all create together, and it's been such a pleasure hearing the episodes come out week after week. So yeah, thank you for joining us one last time. Thank you for all your work, and for our listeners, be sure to tune in next week when Todd and Percy and I will explain Bigfoot. More precisely, we're going to explain our next game, Oh Dang, Bigfoot Stole My Car with My Friend's Birthday Party Inside, which is exactly what it sounds like.
I will save my presentation.
I can't wait to listen to that.
I'll save my cryptid presentation for another time.
At least send us the PowerPoint.
Dungeons and Drama Nerds is produced by Todd Brian Backus, Percival Hornak, and Nicholas Orvis, and is mixed and edited by Anthony Sertel Dean. Our Kids on Bikes game features CJ Linton as the GM, Ella Mock as Kodi Thompson Lee Garcia Smith, Percival Hornak as Hank Boswell, Emma Covert as Fred Hudson, and Esther Yumi as George Privanathan. Kids on Bikes was written by Jonathan Gilmour and Doug Levandowski and published by Hunters Entertainment with Renegade Game Studios and Infectious Play Publishing. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at DN Drama Nerds. Check out cast bios on our website, dungeonsanddramanerds.com, and tune in next week for another episode of Dungeons and Drama Nerds.